Don't know where to start building your fantasy world?
Do you need more? Does it make sense?
Forget any worries and become a crafter of imagination.
This is the place where we will prime your mind.
Now, it's time to heat up the forge.
Break out the mithril ingots and hammer.
Welcome to the World Builder's Anvil. I'm Jeffrey W. Ingram.
And I'm Michael Miller.
Let's sup from the muck of Java and build. Welcome to the World Builder's Anvil, episode 329. Zombie Ant Overlord. Destroyers.
Part 3.
Welcome back. Lost as always. My name is Jeffrey W. Ingram.
And partying too hard, I am Michael Miller.
Can you ever party too hard?
Can you ever hardly party enough?
No.
Yeah, I was up really late last night. I've been working second shift this whole week, and because of
Which
that,
to me is the worst shift.
I gotta tell you, I don't mind it. Like,
Okay.
I really think for me, like my body agrees with second shift a great deal.
Okay.
But the problem is that it has me sleeping during the day when the entire world wants to make noise.
Mm-hmm.
My body, because I haven't been on second shift in quite a while, doesn't want to really sleep at that point in time. And of course, I don't get to hang out with my brother and my nephews and my friend Chris and my wife. So all week long, they were playing cards every day, and they're like, because of COVID. So they're like, hey, you gonna play cards? I'm like, I'm working second shift. I can't. Like, I'm sleeping when they're playing, and then I'm at work when they're playing. So,
Yeah.
So I said to Sarah, Sarah and I hung out Friday. I didn't work Friday, and so we hung out Friday and then Saturday. And I told her, I said, look, I haven't played cards all week, so we're gonna play cards on Saturday. We started at just about 4:00, maybe a little before, and we played till like midnight.
Just a marathon, yeah.
Yeah, we totally marathoned. I played a bunch of games, and then I played Destiny for another hour. So I didn't go to bed till like 1:00 in the morning, and it's like 9 a.m. right now, so I'm a little beat.
Yes, and this is the age of COVID, so I have to ask you: do you find that there's more noise outside right now as summer's opening up in your neighborhood, or is it about the same? Or
well, it's funny because you asked that question, and just a few minutes ago, the guy next door was using the lawnmower, and right now it's quiet. But I don't know.
Like in general,
that's kind of hard to answer because I noticed that I see a lot more people outside that I wouldn't like.
You definitely see it, but you don't necessarily hear it.
Yeah, like I've seen kids on their bikes. I've seen people outside playing or walking and all that jazz. But it's not really noisy.
Noise-wise, it's not the most.
I'm noticing people start to ease off on the social distancing in certain places, and I'm like, this is
sometimes in obnoxious ways.
Yeah, it's kind of.
I get it, and for me, it's like a psychological thing, right? It's like our brains can only handle so much stress about something, and then it's easier to believe conspiracy theories than reality, because the reality is this could be here for God knows how long.
Yeah.
So I kind of get that people are losing it at this point. So I kind of feel bad both ways, But hey, I'm going to stay home and protect my family the most I can. So
yeah, I mean,
I'm on my way if you don't have a mask on. Okay, be better.
I'm very glad to still be working. But I'm, my wife and I are both very tired of this. We're ready. We're so done with COVID.
Yeah, I know. It's like we want to be traveling. We want to do anything. I mean, and we work at home, so that part's not been a huge burden. Not having someone to babysit Eric at all during the week does take hours out of the work week, though.
Yeah. Hey, what are you doing today, Netflix?
But being run by a little man, that's the way it is. So, but I get it. But the thing is, I also understand too that when I'm wearing a mask, I'm not protecting me. I'm protecting someone from me potentially being sick. And so when you don't have the respect to wear back to me, stay the F out of my path. Really, just do. Yeah. You don't want to scout.
I was in a liquor store the other day. Like I was like, oh, it was the end of the work week after we did more than 40 hours in 4 days. Overnight, and all mostly on lifts, which that beats up on your joints.
Yes.
So we were all tired. And so I'm going into the last day and I'm like, I know I'm going to want to get home and have a few drinks tonight. So I stopped at the liquor store on the way into work because I was getting out of work at like 5 a.m. Mm-hmm. So I wasn't going to be able to, get anything. So I had to get it then. And I go inside. The woman behind the counter is behind a shield, but it doesn't cover everything. So she's not wearing a mask. And the guy she's talking to, who's the customer, is not wearing a mask. And they appear to know each other. They're having a friendly conversation. They seem familiar. And he says, now, mind you, I'm like 8 feet away and I am wearing a mask. And he says something like, oh, I got tested the other day. And she looks at him kind of half bug-eyed. She goes, did you test positive? And he's like, I don't know. I haven't gotten the results back. And I'm like, I didn't say anything. But I want to be like, why are you out in public? Like, but then he immediately puts his hands up and he goes, well, the thing is, they said they would only contact me if I was positive. So they said, if I hear nothing, I'm good. He's like, so.
That's a great plan. Yeah.
Right. And so I'm like, well, but he doesn't know the timetable. It's only been like a few days. So I'm just like,
and it depends on what test.
Idiot.
Some tests take like 2 weeks.
Right. So I'm just like, this idiot.
I was like, I was reading an article where there was someone who's worked at a not barbershop, but the hair salon.
Yeah.
And had infected 84 people that they know of. And because she was working with symptoms for 2 weeks before they realized it was COVID. And the problem is, the best science says there's 30% of people never show symptoms.
Yeah.
You don't show symptoms days before you actually show symptoms too. So, and we don't really know how long that period is. So, I mean, the thing is you wear masks to protect other people, not yourself. And so when they wear it, they're protecting you. Let's try and take care of each other the best we can. I know it's not perfect and you can't do everything all the time, but let's take care of some other people for once.
All right, let's get to fictional stupid stuff.
Okay, so let's do something more fun. Let's talk about zombies again. Okay.
So now in the intro, I call this part 3, and that's because we're kind of semi-returning to a subject we've covered before. If you go back to episode 79, one of the best episodes there's ever been on this show because it was the first episode I was on. Yeah. That was called Zombie Overlords, and
before it became too defiant.
And I don't remember what the second numbered episode was.
I don't remember. It might have been like 179 or 279.
Yeah, because it was an anniversary episode where we sort of returned to the Ant Zombie Overlord subject. But Jeff has something special cooked up for us today in that he found a new real thing that he wants to tell us about.
Yeah, and it made me think back to this the zombie ant overlords. Essentially, we got Curiosity Stream, which is pretty cool if you're like me and you like documentaries. It's a lot cheaper than something like Great Courses, but they're actually sort of like Discovery level quality documentaries. So I saw one popped up that said Fire Ant Invasion, and
that's fun.
And so they're talking about how fire ants have really kind of marched literally from a small region of the Amazon. And, it's like now they're pretty much, south of the Mason-Dixon line from, the East Coast, almost all the way over to the West Coast of the United States. They've started invading Australia, many islands, like they've been now found in Hawaii.
How are they crossing oceans?
Ships.
I know, but you figured that would mean that a colony has to be living on that ship and then
or not necessarily live it, but something that's able to start a colony on the ship.
Yeah.
So that's the weird one. So it's a short, like 15-minute episode of, I think it's called Bright On was the name of the documentary. The only episode I watched was a fire ant invasion because I was there to watch history and cultural stuff. If you know me, shouldn't be a shock. But it caught my eyes because ants have always fascinated me. And so I sit there and I'm watching this and they're looking for a way to try and control them because the problem is in the Amazon where they're from, they're not overwhelming ecosystems. But like in the Southeastern United States.
Wait, the Amazon? Oh, you mean the ants are not overwhelming the ecosystem in the Amazon because
there are their own issues they have to deal with there, essentially.
Right.
Natural predators for them. But,
so basically, they've consciously decided that they need a new ecosystem to dominate. That's how I choose to believe.
And it's the rest of the world, apparently. And especially, they do very well in the southeastern United States. You know, and like flooding doesn't stop them because ants, obviously, they can float. And actually, what they'll do is they'll build rafts out of ants, and then other ants will be on top of them. So, like, even like if they're on a boat that crashes at sea, that will not kill them.
Yeah.
You know, they are just a real pest.
They must be stomped out.
And so, and they're sitting there and they're trying to look for non-chemical ways to deal with them, which me personally, I'm like, if I have fire ants in my yard, I'm going to use chemicals and stuff. I don't care. I want them gone because they are ferocious. And if they get on you, they clamp on and they'll just sting you. And it hurts really bad, AKA fire ants. And,
is this the one that like fire ants bite? Is this the one where the bite is a little acidic, and so it's not actually a poison that actually burns the skin?
They don't actually bite you. They only hold on with the mandibles.
Yeah.
They sting you from the abdomen.
It is a sting.
It's more like a hornet. But like a hornet, the stinger doesn't come out, so they clamp and hold and just keep stabbing.
Okay, because there is another kind of ant then that it actually it liquefies your skin, which is why it's so painful. They inject like a little fluid that actually like
and that might actually be the fluid they inject. I know it's supposed to burn really bad, which is how they got their name, fire ants. I'm not exactly sure. I know ants in general, they liquefy the organs of their foes typically when they fight, I believe. So none of this would shock me.
Yeah, heavy drinkers, those guys.
Heavy drinkers, you know. But the cool thing is with but the problem is there's like no predators in the United States for them. So it's like once they get into an ecosystem, their colony grows and grows, and they
have no predator.
Well, I'm sure like frogs do, but they'll kill frogs. I mean, you know, it's like they will kill off every animal in the area that they get their little stingers into, and they're very ferocious and aggressive. So they're tough. So the thing is, there's a fly called a zombie fly, and this is really kind of what made me think of the episode. And the zombie fly, the interesting thing is, they lay their eggs in the back of the fire ants. They can pierce the chitin, and they insert an egg, and they have 100 eggs per fly, and they go around and
I assume that is an approximation.
I'm taking what they said in the documentary. I'm sure there's maybe not exactly in everyone, but they're saying there's 100 essentially 100 bullets per fly. And so essentially they sit around and they land very quickly like flies do on the ants. They sting the ants, inject one egg, and they move on, and they live essentially until they've injected 100 eggs, and then they can die off. But the thing is, there's a little maggot that will then grow inside the fire ant. It will then swim up into the brain, take over the fire ant, and then ultimately it will use the liquid, I believe, of the fire ant to cause the head to decapitate from the fire ant, and then they can get out of the shell. And then there's a new fly that will kill off 100 more ants.
So what I want to know is really, what else can that fly kill?
That's the interesting thing, is it only appears to be fire ants. I don't know if all ants in general, but they said typically what happens is if you have a big, it's like these colonies will get like in the millions easy in size when they start taking over ecosystem. And so what will happen is there won't be enough zombie ants to destroy them, but they can knock the population down by about 90%. But the interesting thing is, in their studies, is
wait. Do you mean there's not enough zombie flies to destroy the ants?
Essentially, once the numbers of the ants get too low, the number of flies will simply start dying off. Yeah. So they won't be enough to finish them off. But then as the ant population starts to grow again, but essentially it seems to keep the colony sizes about 90% smaller.
So it's like it's just a balance that keeps them in check.
It's a balance that keeps them in check, essentially. So, but apparently as the colony gets too small, then the zombie ants just die off. or the zombie flies just die off. But I found it interesting that it was kind of the same idea I had with the ants getting inside and moving up into the brain, but it's they inject an egg which turns into a maggot which goes up into the brain and takes over the ant, which kind of really made me think of the zombie ant overlords. And so this is kind of where I'm getting here is so I'm like, so what is the natural predator? Do we want a predator for the zombie ants? Obviously the question is at least yes, or this is going to be like done episode here very quickly.
Okay, so our goal today is to talk about your zombie ants and what would be a natural predator to it
in a fantasy world.
In your fantasy world. So I think we need to at least briefly go over how your zombie ants work to so the listener has an idea of what's going on. And if you guys haven't picked up on it yet, this is a build episode. So.
Yes, this is a build episode inspired by zombie flies, zombifying ants. So essentially the way my zombie ant overlords work is they're actually small ants, so like 5 millimeters in size, and they eat brain matter. So essentially what they do is
only human or metahuman or any brain matter.
Any brain matter.
Okay.
So it's like they'll take over any form of creature. So what happens is they have essentially a form of the workers, which I call scouts because that makes them the most powerful. They go out, they bite and infiltrate into a creature, we'll say, and then they will burrow their way up into the brain. But their job is not to eat the brain matter, or at least not yet, because normally what ants do is they'll find a food source and a whole line of them will go in and out and they'll pull it out. But what mine do is the scouts, the drivers, will essentially take control of the creature. They'll use it to try and spread more of their ants onto more of the food sources, and then when too much of the brain has disappeared because they're forced to eat a little bit over time and the brain will get damaged, they will take the people back to the colony, and then the colony can take the gray matter out to make sure that their eggs and larvae and their queen and the drones are all fed. So essentially they'll use their food sources as tools to acquire more food sources, and then they'll take the food source back to the thing, and they will then drain the brain matter out to feed the colony. One of the side effects is typically the people die relatively quickly, and the ants actually control the motor skills of the person, which causes them to be slow and act very much like a typical undead zombie, but the cause is different than normal.
I was about to say, like, it sounds awful, but it sounds so if they die quickly, then at least there's a little mercy in there, but it does sound
for the
terrible.
victims. Yeah.
Yes. Because they're like, okay, we're going to take you back home and scoop your brains out.
Yeah, exactly. And I just think it's an interesting way to do it. I don't think it's very realistic. For those of you who look for realism, if you want to chime me on that, feel free. But it's the idea of when you get that little twinge on your skin, that little creepy crawly feeling that sometimes you get, that could be one of these ants, right? And game over, man. Because they're not big things.
It's a bug hunt.
It's really a bug hunt, but it's 5 millimeter size bug. Good luck finding it, and if you can, they're easy to kill because they're a little bug. But if you fail to catch them all, just one gets inside of you, you're done at that point. It's a matter of time. Then they get to your brain, and then it's just really game over. So, for me, it's like it's horrifying because you can't control it. So now the question is, what do we want to stop it? And the easy thing would be to recreate zombie flies.
Well, I have a thought on it, and I don't know if you want to go this way, but because it kind of changes our focus. But what if instead of something being a natural predator to it, it was something that wanted to take advantage of what they do? Whether that's
control it, yeah.
Well, yeah, whether that's they want to use it to control, but like what? Okay, how about this? So the ants want to eat the brain, right? And just the brain.
Mm-hmm.
That's all they care about?
Yes.
So that means there's going to be a lot of meat left over.
Interesting. I kind of feel like I know where you're going here.
So what would want to take advantage of all that leftover meat, aside to just your basic predators? That I'm saying, like zombies, because in most fiction, once a zombie has been downed, nothing's going to eat that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So we can play one of two ways with that. We can say, okay, well, it's a zombie body, so
yeah, I'd say anything truly like. Even a natural carrion eater probably would. The ones that have eaten them would have been infected with ants and probably less likely to reproduce. So they would get selected out over the course of time.
Because you think a normal carrion would go after the body too early, and ants would get onto that thing, and subsequently. Okay.
So it has to be one, but smarter versions might be able to learn how to know when. So maybe it is like a carrion type of thing.
I'm wondering if
a relationship, sort of a pilot fish kind of in reverse.
Yeah, I'm thinking that, but I'm trying to come up with something a little more nefarious than just a scavenger.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like what in your world, or what could we create? Whether it's a creature or a kind of person, like you, like what jumped out at me is you have. I'm not going to
say it.
So yeah, I wasn't going to, but I see the let's battle of the.
That could be it, right?
Okay, so why don't you say that, because it was your thought first, but that is what
one of my thoughts was, let the battle of the necromancers begin. Maybe
say that a little slower.
Let the battle of the necromancers begin.
Yeah,
maybe the necromancers are perturbed to have competition, but Michael's angle is maybe, well, when the ants are done, the body's still usable for a
but I'm also thinking, what if like a necromancer just did something so that the ants aren't going to bother him? So he has an ant colony at his front door, and they just go get him stuff, and they bring it back to him.
So instead of a true necromancer, maybe a insectomancer, and he uses the insects to act as a necromancer without knowing necromancy.
And maybe when they get back to the the ants are doing just naturally what they do, they like go get a body and they bring it back and to the colony with the intention of scooping the brains out. So there's still a lot of brains left in there, you know, right? I assume that they don't hollow it out much until it gets back to the colony.
No, but the part they hollow out, the body becomes less and less usable. So essentially, most of the gray matter will still be there, but the motor skills quickly degrade. So a few days of use. Yes.
Well, my point is, when it gets back, maybe the necromancer does something so that the ants get off of it, and then he can take it away and do whatever he wants to it, thus leaving the ants to go out and get another one.
Mm-hmm. Well, usually by the time they bring the body back, they've used that body to go put hands on shoulders, to like pat people on the shoulder, and ants are coming off of them onto the new person. So
that's awful. I love that idea. I didn't realize they were that bad.
Well, it's like they can't make them talk, but the thing is, it's using nature to camouflage yourself, right? So if you're one of the herd, you can go rub up against the herd, usually to a degree. In worst case, you get stabbed, but the ants don't feel the pain.
Right.
So what do you like? A knife attack.
So what do you like the idea of better? Do you like the idea of a person, a culture, a higher thinking being taking advantage of these things? Or do you like the idea of having some sort of natural predator?
I don't mind it, but it has to control them in a way.
So it has to control them in a way like the way they control a human, or just take advantage of the situation? Like, do you
take advantage of the situation? I think, but the relationship can't be too cozy there, because the ants would turn anyone. So you can't control the minds of a billion, or half a billion things. And if the population of the ants gets too large, then it's going to be harder and harder for the person to control it. So they're going to need some way to control the population of the ants. The other thing is it could be supernatural, too. It's like I have my Overlord demons, which we've never talked about here.
Oh, is it time to?
Maybe because I mean, and Michael will know that there's another form of demon in my world called a phalanx demon, which the reason they're called a phalanx demon is not because they use spears, to hold their enemy back, but it would be fighting one of these things is like fighting an entire phalanx. They're very powerful physically. If left on their own, suffer so harshly from the 7 deadly sins that every turn they might do something else, which in a way makes them a little bit easier to survive than you'd expect, because they might not decide that killing you is the most important thing. It might be eating too much. So the person they killed 3 turns ago, they might start to eat in the middle of a battle, and other more nefarious types of things. So they're very tall, they're very large, they're spiky, they have venom, they can fly, but they're really dumb.
Well, is it that they're dumb, or is it that they cannot control themselves, which are two different things?
It's a little bit of both. They have a very low intelligence. They don't have any natural communication, but they can be controlled easily. They have a low will, which is actually their weakness. But there's usually
a necromancer's strength.
Yeah, but a lot of times there's actually a demon, that needs to control them. It's hard to control outer plane beings, even if they're low in will. But there are other kinds of beings, if you strike deals with, that can control them really easy. So sometimes you'll have a deal struck with one of these overlord demons. And actually, I don't know much about them outside that they pull the strings. I don't know if one's ever actually even been seen in my game. Their hands have been in the game, but I don't think they've ever actually been seen in any of my games or any of my stories. Phalanx demons have been not super common either, because they can kill off entire parties. It's like fighting a dragon, in a different kind of way, though. But they are insanely hard to kill. I don't know if one's ever been killed. They've been driven off due to damage. I know that, but not killed, I don't think. But maybe close.
All right. So again, I still pose my question, like, what do you prefer to make here? Like, what do we want it to be? Do you have a preference? Like, do you want a creature, or do you want a person, or do you want a small culture or cult?
I don't like the culture or a cult.
Okay.
Even though a cult or culture might be used, I like either the brainiac villain, or just the natural. I think in the brainiac villain was kind of where I was believing here, whether or not it's a direct predator, or they try and control the population, so that they control the colony, but they take use of the work of the ants, and sometimes the bodies are used for their own ends. Instead of to spread more ants, they're used to do other things. So,
okay. So again, then,
I'm leaning towards character.
So you're leaning towards character. So do you have anyone in your storyline already? Oh, excuse me.
Oh,
do you have anyone in your storyline already that might take advantage of this type of thing, like someone that already exists within your storyline that we could manipulate into fitting here, or would you rather start from scratch?
I would say there are people, the Aeskrii overlords, the ambassadors, as I like to call them, would potentially use any tool, because they're infiltrators. So essentially, when the Aeskrii go to invade, before they invade, they send ambassadors. The ambassadors are not there to create goodwill or to try and negotiate with the people. They're there to get the Aeskrii fingertips in, to help break down the culture a bit, so that when the invasion force comes, there's less resistance.
Yeah, this could be used as a biological weapon. It was like, oh no, it's like not the Aeskrii that have undone this village, this town, this castle, whatever. It's these ants. Has nothing to do with the Aeskrii whatsoever. It's a natural thing. But the Aeskrii are like, okay, look, let's get the ants here, because that'll slowly knock.
Let's drop them in a few places. That'll create chaos. It'll create dissent between the people and their rulers, between the rulers and each other. They won't trust each other.
Not to mention fear.
create fear, which, then when the Aeskrii armies come, they can act as liberators as they march through towns rather than conquer.
We can get rid of the ants. Ooh, now we're talking. Now we're talking.
So
create the problems, create the problem to solve the problem, sort of control.
Yep.
All right.
So
now
it's a tool at the disposal of the ambassadors.
Well, do you want to narrow the focus though? Because do you want to have it be just something that one select guy or a few have figured out how to do? And is it magic or is it natural? Have they figured out a natural way to keep these things away from themselves? And also, basically you're talking about them needing to take some of the ants and move them from point A to point B without getting infected themselves.
Yes. And that's why I think it's a tool that is not necessarily liked to be used, but in areas where, it could be expensive to invade, is a tactic that, maybe of last resort that gets used, because it's probably a little harder than even the Aeskrii want to admit on wiping out the colonies afterwards. Because think about, you have a colony of 500 million ants, make sure they're all squished.
We missed one.
That's right. And killing the queen, is it enough? Because like you said, is there always a queen in those groups that are on ships that sneak off to get
well, that's what islands? I mean, there's got to be, right?
There's got to be, but maybe, animals have a way of, doing what they need. Like, okay, we're here now. We're going to do the special
the Jeff Goldblum life finds a way.
Life finds a way sort of answer, where, maybe not always, but sometimes it can maybe happen,
Well, these are your ants. So what do you think?
Well, I think they can. That's one of the things that makes them so nefarious. And the reason why they just wouldn't be used more commonly. So I think, it's like, and I think it's like magic would be the easy answer here, because the Aeskrii, are, like I said, they're ruling council of 100 and 1,000. There's a council of 100 and a council of 1,000. And I haven't talked much about them here, but I think I've talked about this before, where the idea is, in terms people might understand, is the council of 1,000 would be powerful wizards from like D&D. They've learned a magic, as we like to call it here in Overlord's Anvil. They have a huge spell repertoire at their command, and they're really powerful in their own way. The Council of 100 would be more like mages from Mage the Ascension. In a world that
they just get it.
It's just they get it. They can, as well as they can understand how magic works, they can weave together effects from magic itself, rather than needing a ritual to call forth to conjure magic. So there's no conjuration of magic. Well, I guess they could conjure if they wanted to. It depends on how they decided to weave it. It's much more nimble. It's much more. It's like they're taking the raw stuff and they just kind of mush it together in their hands and use it. Where the other guys need a longer ritual and more energy to approximate certain effects. And then they're much more limited, because, if the effect is X, the effect is always X. It's not a variable for a learned or mage, but for the Council of 100, if they know something that causes X, they can go, well, let me take a little bit of Y and we'll have X and Y together and cause real problems.
Now, I go back and forth on my opinions of where to seat magic when you're trying to create something or whatever, because I feel like it can be used. I don't want to get hamstringed into, or rather, I don't want to use it as
that's why I'm thinking.
I don't want to use it as a crutch, because magic can easily be the Swiss Army knife of your world. You can easily be like, okay, well, I need a thing to work a certain way. So, magic, just because. And now, for some things, I'm totally cool with that. But I feel like for what we're doing right now,
and here it's so obvious that I don't want to.
Exactly. And I think it's a little easy. For those of you who
understand me, is like, even though these are magicians, I'm thinking I don't want to do that, because once again, I like stereotypes, but I like twisting them. So when people, when you expect the trope too much, and you're looking for the answer there, it's always wrong.
Wait a minute. I got. All right. I'm further twisting our concept here. What if it's more simple than that?
That's what I'm thinking.
What if it's simply a case of all someone really needs to do is figure this out, that ants eat brains. That's all. And then someone needs to be horrible enough, like take a slave and
start experimenting.
No, just walk them to the colony. You know, like you've got them on a stick with a leash, so they're away from you, and you just put them near the colony, and then you got to get them from point A to point B. So they're infected, and you've got them. The ant might be trying to control the guy, but you physically have them, and then you just set them free in a village that you don't like.
Yeah, that'd be the easy way to spread it. And they don't really control the ants.
Right.
They're controlling the distribution.
Exactly.
That's what I'm thinking. Because here's kind of what I started to write down about the time you had your aha moment. And I said, a lost tribe reunited with the Aeskrii. So the Aeskrii, they're kind of my allegory for the Persian Empire back in the golden day. It was to an outside culture, something larger than you could imagine. And they came to dominate a huge swath of the planet. And for them, magic was the backbone. But earlier on, they were just this small tribe that settled, and ultimately in this city near a river, they're Babylon. And so they kind of came down from the mountain for their mountain plateau to take the city at some point. But at some point, part of them had got broken apart, or that's the story that's used to justify their inclusion into the council. But I'm thinking, to be on the councils, you have to be magic wielding, and you have to be Aeskrii. You can be very powerful in society and maybe even a noble of a sort, but the council remains Aeskrii only. So there's this group of people who come from a more jungle spot that have these ants, and they've been willing to do the things to figure out how they work. And this is knowledge they hold very secret, sort of like the way the old Chinese emperors protected the knowledge of how silk is made. And what they'll do is, when they were reunited with the rest of the Aeskrii, when they were accepted back in as part of the Aeskrii family, they brought this knowledge into a new tool into the arsenal. Now, the Aeskrii don't like this tool being used because it's hard to control. And these ants are very persistent, but it really can break down a stronger foe. And there are some stronger foes that aren't necessarily stronger than the empire as a whole, but they know like fighting them is going to be really bloody. And it would be just a lot simpler if they were to start falling apart, and the Aeskrii were then to come in and sort of burn out these nests that had been laid. And so if the Aeskrii don't actually ever get defeated, there might be some that survive and over time build up and cause troubles in areas, even post the Aeskrii exiting the world stage in my world. So I kind of like this idea where there's this tribe. So it's not everyone, not all of Aeskrii, because it's too large of a group. But there's like this certain line of mages that know this thing, and even the other Aeskrii mages, they assume it's a hidden form of magic that they don't know.
But it's probably just some knowledge and some cautious physical work.
Yeah, it might even be a combination of using magic to help keep the body preserved as they're moving it, and
also keep the ants from like crawling towards them.
But like I said, it would have to like preserve and kind of encase the body at the same time. But it's something that their tribe probably figured out as a whole, and now but it's the mages who, after the Aeskrii conquered the area, who are the only ones who are eligible to move into the nobility. So, and it sucks if you're like the firstborn heir, and you don't have magic. Guess who's not going to inherit? Which does create some strife over time, but that's a different story.
I was about to say that sounds like a cultural thing more so than what we're getting into here.
But so you have this one group of Aeskrii mages who know how to do it, and they harshly hoard the secret. They allow people to think that it's strictly this magical thing that they know, and it drives people crazy because it's like, even the true mages, it's like, I can't control like 20 million ants, and that would be a small colony, so
and for me, I like the idea of it being like a horrible last resort, like something that while they respect that doing something like this is a difficult task, it's also like that is such a horrible thing to do that it's not like a go-to. It's not like
they don't
it's not like their first it's not like the first thing that it's like, well, we could always do this, and they're like, no, not that.
No, and I love that idea. Yep.
Only in the worst.
One of the things in my world is the Aeskrii aren't evil in the sense that like the big evil world conquering people always typically seem to be. Their larger structure
I thought they were kind of like that. I always looked at them as kind of like the Illuminati.
You lived in a world post the Aeskrii, and they were the boogeymen, and that was the way they were presented. And all of the cultures who survived them, that's the way they were remembered. And in a way, if you were around in their time, you didn't want to tackle with them because you almost always lost. The thing was, like, their motivation, it was typically it was a righteous motivation. It was, they came from a very arid spot, and so for them, the equal exchange of water was the most important thing. So like if they would go to to Minnesota where there's 10,000 lakes, if those 10,000 lakes weren't pristinely all taken care of, they would see it as an affront and a reason to invade Minnesota.
Fair enough.
And it's to protect the water because the water is the precious thing to them because of where they're from. And for them, it's like they don't necessarily even want to devastate areas. They just want to make sure they're properly managed so that the water is taken care of and treated and elevated the way it needs. And some of the water will go back to the homeland, and the other water, will be there distributed with the people there. As long as they do as the Aeskrii say, they will have their equal share, which is a little less than what the Aeskrii get.
Does that change over time? Like if they get to an area that is water, prevalent, rich, yes, where there's lots of water, and they settle, if they grow into that area,
that would be considered decadence. So, like having 70 wives as a Christian king would be considered decadent. Other Aeskrii would look at you as decadent if you misused water,
and this is frowned upon.
And this would be frowned upon because it's like, it took them thousands of years to start to get going. And once they started to get going, they became like a freight train that was very hard to stop. So, but it's like you had thousands of years of cultural, and yes, there are people who definitely, abused water and did not use water correctly, who were Aeskrii. And typically the Aeskrii, and it's harder to deal with your own, but sometimes you had to. And if it was the emperor, it's even more difficult, right? If it was the king of kings, it's much more difficult to deal with because you owe your allegiance to the king of kings, but if he's not treating water right, that it's sacrilege.
So their worldview is pretty ingrained.
It's pretty ingrained, yeah. So I mean, and it definitely does, and it's very natural for that to happen, right? If you're the Aeskrii Overlord of Minnesota, and you have 10,000 lakes. It's kind of hard to
the Aeskrii Overlord of Minnesota.
But you have the 10,000 lakes under your control at that point. Water is cheap.
Yeah, well, that's
it's hard to hold precious. Yeah. But that's inherently a flaw. But there's so many parts of the empire where water is not prevalent. Remember, it's huge swaths of steppe in my world. Steppes aren't deserts, but they're kind of close in rainfall typically. You'll have a rainy season, or rain will fall at times, but it will quickly run off in rivers and then flow away. Or if it's warm enough, it will start evaporating very, very quickly. So, because there's no trees to protect it, that's the inherent nature of a steppe. So, you're not. So, typically, any steppe people, any desert people hold water, and where the Aeskrii come from was a near desert steppe, essentially. So they weren't nomadic. They'd had small settlements before they started. They conquered the first city, their Babylon. But it's all about controlling the water, and that's the reason why that city was important. It was on a major river that flew through the middle of this. It's not as desperate as like the Nile with harsh deserts on both sides of it, but the water was rare enough that controlling that water source was the key thing that started their growth into empire. So,
all right. So getting back to the ants themselves, and how do you want this evolution to occur? Like, or do you just want to chalk it up to what we've discussed already? I was going to say, do we want to explain how it came to be? Like, the first experiments with them, or was there one guy that figured it out and then just?
Well, I think it was tribally figured out. So essentially, you have this tribe who lives in proximity to where they are in a rainforest somewhere, and they have to just kind of deal with occasionally realizing that some of their people might be taken over, and understanding the early signs of what it looks like, because they weren't wiped out as a tribe, so they figured out enough to be able to know that this person is now controlled, and so they have to be killed. Their body has to be burned or something like that, which is probably what they initially would do, is they would burn the bodies of people that they thought were infected. And it might have even taken a while for them to realize it was ants. But once they realized it was ants, it was a matter of time of figuring out, oh wait, now if we get, we'll send this person infected over to the other tribe that we hate. And they started becoming pretty powerful in their area, using this as a weapon. And then when the Aeskrii come rolling in as a steamroller and take everything over, they go, oh, you must be our lost brothers. So your mages are now our mages. And
so this wasn't originally an Aeskrii culture. It was one of the ones that they
it's lost tribe and quote.
Yes. It's the Aeskrii assimilating a culture.
Yeah. Which they typically wouldn't do. Typically, they leave a culture intact. They would take anyone who could take magic into their fold, though. So like the only mage.
Oh, so they wouldn't take a whole culture. They'd just take a specific person.
Yeah. But from here, they incorporated the entire tribe, and the reason is it was to control that information. So the entire tribe became a lost tribe that must have been lost, because now the entire tribe, magic and non-magic, were all incorporated into the Aeskrii brand, essentially.
Brand. They are good at branding.
So they used it for war, and probably by the time the Aeskrii came, they probably they knew, we'll say like mummification of bodies. And this way, and it's not true mummification, but essentially it's like they're preserving the body so everything is in stasis, including the ants.
Not through magic means.
Not through magic. It will be through like ritual, but like this type of liquid gets poured in, it disperses through. It's probably some kind of anesthesia, really. And they don't wrap the bodies, but they probably encase them in almost a sarcophagus type of thing to help, make sure, and then that gets sealed.
So is this more
ants can't get out?
So you say stasis. That makes me think that the body is so well preserved. It's not a drying process.
It's not your typical mummification is a bad term because it's a drying process. This is a preservation process. Okay. So it's not true mummification. It is preserving the body and sealing it until it's needed.
We'll need this later.
And then you figure, like, through this kind of technique, though, they probably started becoming fairly powerful on their own, because what they would do is they would take they'll take one of the bodies and send it in. So, and through that, they could then use it as a bomb, and drop it in on a city. And over time, it'll cause chaos and disruption inside the city, weakening any defenses, if not outright killing off everyone in the city. So,
I like it.
Yep. I think that is where we go. Would you like to do you want the world building or the real world task today?
I will take the world building task. Overrun a world with overrun a world or two with the undead. So we've actually talked about doing this before, where we've encouraged you guys
to do the world building example. Yeah.
where we've told you guys to do a zombie apocalypse, or we've requested you guys do apocalypse stories in your worlds. We've encouraged you to do a zombie outbreak. So just overrun the world with the undead. It doesn't have to be humanoid zombies. No. It can be ants. It could be flies. Yeah. It could be pterodactyl zombies. It could be robot zombies. That would be confusing, but I choose to believe that you can do it.
Yes, we have faith in you. And for your real world task, avoid the practice of necromancy on Earth.
Really a bummer, guys. Just try to skip that. I know it's tempting because of the power. It's kind of like how the dark side is tempting, but just skip the necromancy.
Skip the necromancy. It's for the betterment. Right. We will see you all next time. Have a great week. Thank you so much for listening to the World Builders Anvil.
We would love it if you would share the World Builders Anvil with 2 of your friends.
And so would they.
If they are unfamiliar with podcasts, then you get to introduce them to the wonderful world of podcasting.
Take them to Stitcher or iTunes, or best of all, just send them to our website, www.gardul.com.
That's GARDUL.com.
Now strike while the mithril's hot.